Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining this morning.
Corey, just let me know as the participation gets up or when you want me to start and we can get started.
You can go ahead and get started. I started the recording.
Okay, perfect. Um, Hi, good morning, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining today's webinar on crime and theft prevention best practices. My name is Amy March and I'm a senior risk consultant here at Hub. Just a couple things before we get started. As we just mentioned, this session is being recorded, and that recording will be available under the Risk Toolkit tab in Hub Drive Online, so that you can go back and review it, or if you have other members on your team that you think this would be helpful, so you'll be able to find it there. Also, if you have any questions during the session, please enter them into the chat. I'm going to have Corey monitoring the chat, so we'll do our best to get to all of those questions, either during or at the end of the presentation. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. There we go. Going to get started really quickly today just with, what are the risks and the common risks for last mile delivery when it comes to, crime and theft risks. And I think the first that comes to mind for everyone, obviously, is, package theft, package and cargo theft. It's one of the most common and costly issues, especially, if, with unattended deliveries and unattended vehicles. So certainly that's one that's always at top of mind. Another growing concern that we're seeing a lot of in many parts of the country is vehicle theft and break-ins. Certainly, this is occurring a lot even when we have delivery vans that are left unattended, even just briefly, especially if you were talking like high-risk areas. So that is another area certainly to be concerned about, because the thieves are targeting not just the vehicles, but also packages that are, inside the vehicles themselves. We're also seeing more of, driver assault, and even, a lot of that's as a result of a robbery attempt. And so we're seeing that more and more in, last mile and, delivery operations. So we know that your drivers are often working alone, and that makes them vulnerable to, that assault and robbery attempts, especially again in some of the high risk areas where you may be delivering. And of course, all of those risks are going to contribute to, financial losses and potential reputational risks for your organization. So we're going to, take this time to discuss, some of the ways that you're going to be able to control and mitigate those risks and best practices for you. I wanted to take just a minute to talk about some, kind of real life examples that have been in the headlines in the last, in the last year. Just because a lot of times when we think about these type of things, I have a lot of clients, and sometimes people think, well, that may happen somewhere else, but it's probably not, happening in my area or going to happen to me. So we want to just kind of bring a few of these to light, and just note that it may not have happened in your area, but these are trends that we're seeing. So we want to make everyone aware. So first one, just quickly, December 2024, this happened in New Haven, Connecticut. Driver left the truck running during a delivery. And just a brief, running up to drop a package, someone, got into the driver's seat and stole the vehicle. So it can happen just that quickly. October 2024, Chicago police were, seeing and reporting that there were armed thieves that had stolen packages from delivery workers directly, and that was a trend they were seeing in an area of the city, and that it had happened 7 times since September. And so you're talking in a month's period, they're seeing some armed robberies of delivery drivers, just in a several week period. And then most recently in February 2025, obviously this is the most recent and, certainly the most severe one that, I have as an example, but there was a delivery driver that was fatally shot as she approached a driveway, and this occurred in rural Missouri. Obviously this is a, ongoing investigation. The resident that, shot the delivery driver was arrested. and charged with murder. However, again, ongoing investigation. So they have not put out, if they're, what the motive was. But during the police investigation and interviews of, people in the neighborhood, they reported that that resident that shot the delivery driver had previously complained and maybe had words with that delivery driver about them driving too fast down their road. So again, just a few real life examples we wanted to touch on. So, you can kind of understand, that we're talking things that are not super severe, but still a risk, but also all the way up to, certainly someone losing their life, which is a very severe situation. So let's talk a little bit now about how you can prevent those situations from happening, how we can mitigate the risk, and talk about a little bit about vehicle security as well as your terminal security. So as I said, vehicle and package theft has been increasing across the country. So it's just important that you have controls in place to protect your assets as well as your drivers. So we're going to talk about some of the controls that can be installed to protect your vehicle and your cargo. Something everybody's familiar with, right? Alarm systems. So an alarm system on a vehicle obviously is an easy way. It can deter thieves. Some of these alarm systems can be connected to your GPS or telematics. And so, a fleet manager or someone in your organization can get an alert in the event that there may be a vehicle break-in or potential theft. So, certainly an easy and well-known way to, protect your vehicles from theft and deter that. Auto lock systems, you may have that in some of your vehicles already. So for those of you that don't know, that's, they're systems that are kind of like smart lock systems. And so they're going to automatically lock that vehicle. They use different triggers. You can choose what set them the way you'd like. Some of them are proximity sensors. So think like a key fob. Has to be close enough, like your push button start vehicle, right? It's not going to start or whatever if it's not close enough. So stuff like that. If once the fob's far away, it'll automatically lock. Sometimes you can set it for any time a vehicle is turned off or put in park. But you can set a lot of those mechanisms to kind of trigger to suit your workflow. But again, certainly we talk about people, these thieves targeting vehicles that may be left unattended for any reason. Well, I'm sure everyone is telling drivers, make sure the vehicle's locked, but in the event that they forget to do that, right? This is just another layer of security so that if someone forgets to do that, the vehicle's going to auto lock itself. Same kind of deal with vehicle immobilizers. So those are security devices that are going to prevent that vehicle from starting unless the correct key or transponder is present. So again, thinking about like a push button start where you have a key fob or a certain that they have to tap or whatnot so that that vehicle can start. So only that authorized person has it. There are also systems that offer remote immobilization. So that means, let's say someone reports that a vehicle, has been, stolen or whatnot, or, maybe you feel like your vehicle's being used, in an unauthorized manner. It, allows someone remotely to disable the ignition once the vehicle is turned off. Obviously, you can't just shut it off and say they're, driving down the road, but once they turn that vehicle off, you can, set that to where the vehicle is not able to start until, it's reset from that situation. So a lot of times you can tie those type of things to that GPS tracking and geofencing, but that allows you to track your vehicle in the event of theft. And then again, connecting some of those auto locks or vehicle immobilizers so that, let's say they get out of a certain area. Once that vehicle's shut off, then, it can be remotely immobilized until, it's reset by someone in your organization. So that prevents, helps with preventing that theft, as well as unauthorized use by a vehicle, maybe even by an employee that, let's say, is trying to utilize the company vehicle to go run their own errands or work a side job. So obviously, in addition to all of those engineering controls we discussed for your drivers and your vehicles, it's essential to establish a clear protocol and provide training and standard operating procedures, right, for those drivers. Most of these seem pretty straightforward, and you would think that these are things people are doing all the time, but it may not be. And so you just want to have this clear protocol that you're going over with them. So certainly whenever possible, we're parking, they're parking the vehicle in, areas that are well lit. Even better if they're able to see, they know there's a, ring camera or they see another commercial, security camera, parking in view of those, because that just adds an extra layer of protection and deterrence for any thieves. And also, if something does happen, you can certainly, hopefully be able to access that surveillance footage. Just instructing drivers that anytime they are making a delivery or leaving that vehicle unattended, even if it's even if they can still see the vehicle, that the vehicle needs to be turned off. They need to take out the keys. The doors are going to be locked, even if they're just, even if they can still see it. Because again, as we, discussed in one of those examples, I believe that driver was probably no more than, 50, 75 feet from his vehicle, right? So not super far away, just parked on a street, ran up to a porch or up to where he was delivering to drop a package. And in that very short period of time, someone was able to jump in that vehicle and steal it. So really driving home that, you want to make sure that, you're following those protocol, because even if you're leaving that vehicle unlocked for a short period of time, it really creates that easy opportunity, for someone to, for that theft. For, certainly for driver safety and to ensure safety of the vehicle and the cargo, really instructing them that they need to avoid sitting idle. So, if they have the doors unlocked and windows down and the engine running, especially in high risk areas, but, if they're taking a break, right? Really being aware of how they're doing that, and, understanding that those type of behaviors can significantly increase vulnerability, right? So if you've got the windows down, and it's running, it's very easy for someone to run up and possibly assault you and, take your vehicle. As opposed to, not having, easy access for someone to just come up to your vehicle and take it, right? So instructing them where those high risk areas are and where you would prefer them if they needed to stop to say check, on an app to see where next deliveries are, take a break and eat their lunch, whatever that may be, really giving them some instruction on where not to do that and how to do that safely. The other thing that, certainly is good to consider, and some of you may be doing this, and there may be panic buttons in the vehicles, right? But let's just say that, a driver is not in the vehicle, or, so how are they, utilizing a panic button that you may be providing? So they do have wearable panic buttons, and that's going to allow your driver to quickly and, discreetly, if needed, signal, for help if they're in a dangerous and emergency situation. So, let's say there is, a robbery that's in progress, or they just witnessed somebody that, took their vehicle, or, someone is, they've just gotten beaten up by someone, or even something that's maybe not a crime or a theft. Let's just think of an emergency situation, right? They've slipped and fell, and maybe they're unable to get up because they've broken a bone or they're injured and no one's around. Maybe it's a rural area, no one's home, their cell phone they've left in their vehicle, right? So they're able to push that button, and most of these are connected to GPS. So that's going to allow your company, someone at your company to be alerted, and then first responders to be alerted, and to be able to easily locate that individual to, render them aid regardless of that situation. So certainly something good to look into. And there's all sorts of different tech that's available. Like I said, there's a lot of wearable tech, whether it's like a little bracelet or watch, or it can, it's an app that can be installed easily. Sometimes it's a badge or a button that they can have, on their uniform or on a lanyard. So lots of different options to just ensure your drivers are, feel comfortable and have a, an easy, quick way to notify someone if there is an emergency, as opposed to just having to pick up a phone and either call, your organization or call 911, right? The last bullet, and I'll kind of preface that by saying, we understand that, finding employees is difficult. So, kind of prefacing with the considering the second person on routes to say, you know, looking at that, if it seems like it's doable, especially during those times when people, you've got extra deliveries during the holidays, maybe, and we've got daylight savings, so it's getting darker sooner, and then especially in those high risk areas. So certainly it may not be something that is, doable or really a big deal for a lot of your areas, but if they are high risk or high crime areas, certainly considering during those peak times, or times of extra risk, maybe when it's a little darker outside, to have a second person ride those routes, just so you don't have either a driver left unattended, by themselves. So you have two people, and then just so that vehicle, it doesn't have to be left unattended at all during those deliveries. So I spent a little time talking about, discussing controls and best practices, to protect your vehicles and your drivers, that are out on those delivery routes. But let's take just a few seconds to talk about those best practices, to ensure security at your terminal or your warehouse. Um, Certainly, perimeter fencing, having, fencing, that's going to create that clear physical barrier, and it's going to serve as the first line of defense against unauthorized access, right? So that means you're not having people that are able to just walk in and out, as they please. You've got a really, controlled area. Um, I know we're gonna, I mentioned lighting a lot because it's just so important, but making sure that you have adequate lighting, and installing that at, all of your critical points, and that's gonna include your access gates, along that perimeter, and for certainly, throughout those parking areas and garage areas where those vehicles are being stored when they're not in use, your delivery vehicles. Lighting is gonna act as a great deterrent. And it also, kind of segues into our next, bullet, cameras, because it's gonna, having that good lighting really improves your camera visibility. So not only are are people able to see, hey, this is lit up like this place is lit up like a Christmas tree. It's gonna be hard for me to sneak in, and I see cameras all over the place, and they're gonna be able to see me very well on a camera because it's well lit. So, just it seems like something that's very simple, but it is a such a good and easy way to, deter any sort of intruders or thieves. Cameras and alarms, certainly key components of any monitoring systems. So, having that surveillance, and, the alarms that are going to trigger any sort of, suspicious activity, or, a breach, in an unauthorized area. So I imagine that is something everyone is probably does have in place, but just, making sure those are up to date, that everything's working. The worst thing to find out is something happens and it's like, oh yes, we have cameras, but oh, it doesn't look like that one was working or recording at the time. So ensuring that whoever provides that service to you, if it's an outside service that provides it, they've got a regular, maintenance schedule that they're checking in. Somebody's able to alert you if a camera's not working, and get someone out to fix it. Um, Security guards. So, depending on the size of your terminal or your facility, you may want to employ some security guards, and that's, typically with a third party company. Make sure that you have that you do it strategically. So certainly, stationed at an access point. And then really doing that kind of roaming security walk, from time to time, especially in those after hours times when there are not a lot of employees or maybe no employees at the facility. Um, because that presence really adds that human element to the security infrastructure. And that's someone that has the specific job of, ensuring that they're reporting any suspicious activity or any sort of, issues at your facility. And then that brings us to access control. So you certainly want to limit your access points, especially if you have a larger facility, ensuring that employees are entering and exiting through, just one area. Because that's going to limit the ways that you can get people that don't belong in, right? So if you, only have to control one area, that's better for you. Requiring credentials, badges, key cards for all authorizing employees. for all your authorized employees. So that may be showing a security guard a badge or having to, swipe in to get into, through a gate or whatnot. But and I imagine a lot of people are doing that. I do want to point out though that the biggest thing with, having credentials is, making sure that you have a good protocol for deactivating those credentials. If someone is terminated or suspended, and is no longer, an authorized person to enter that property. The biggest mistake that I see made is having a situation where, you're requiring somebody to turn something in and it can't be deactivated, and then maybe they don't do that and they get in. And I know a lot of your facilities, y'all employ a lot of people. So, and maybe people change, there may be some turnover from time to time. And so people may not be aware that someone is, no longer, supposed to be on property. So having that way to, even if that person doesn't come back in, to, remotely deactivate that key card, or make it to where it's going to trigger someone to say, hey, you're not on the active list anymore, even better. And so not only to prevent that, theft and vandalism, that sort of thing, but workplace violence as well, because that is an issue that we are seeing creep up. We're not going to deep dive into that on this webinar. But certainly that protects you and really reduces those vulnerabilities from that standpoint. Um, Having, protocol for escorting visitors and any contractors that are doing work. Whatever that may be for you, it may be a visitor's badge. There's obviously outside of crime and theft, we're looking at, liability issues as well. So just, ensuring that, you're able to monitor them, monitor those folks at all times when they're on site, that what visitors have, and contractors have been authorized to come in. Another thing with access control is really training those employees, that, let's just say the guy behind you says, hey, I forgot my badge. Can you just badge me in today? Um, or I forgot my key card, or I left it in the car. I don't want to walk back. Again, ensuring that we have that good training and getting those employees, in that mindset that, you don't do that. And if someone left their badge at home, they can call a supervisor, they can get that taken care of in that, a different manner than just having someone let them in. Same with a visitor. Hey, I'm here to meet with so and so, because you just don't know, there's no way for that employee to know who the person is. Even if it is an employee, what if that employee had been suspended or terminated and the person letting them in just, obviously had not been made aware of that or wasn't sure because technically they were on the job yesterday, right? So really just a protection for your facility and really having some good control over your access points. So employee training, obviously a huge part of, your, anything that you're doing, any of your protocol, but certainly with crime and theft as well. So you're going to want to conduct some regular employee training on situational awareness, especially, for your drivers that are out in the field. Um, as well as people that are, working in a terminal or, at your warehouse, but certainly out in the field, ensuring kind of the things we talked about, right? That they understand the protocol. We're not parking somewhere where we know that it's a high crime area, with our windows down. We're not leaving, we're kind of looking around to see if anything looks out of the ordinary. If we see, and it seems like people may be following us, or we see the same person all the time, that's really just seems like it's a little funny that they're always in that spot watching. So being able to recognize that, those, suspicious behavior and possible attempts of theft so that they can, report that immediately. Conflict avoidance and de-escalation, again, especially for people in the field. Um, I use the example of the, unfortunate situation of the delivery driver that was, shot and killed by a resident. Obviously we have limited facts on that, but, that preliminary investigation did, kind of, uh, uncover that, there may have been some resident, the resident may have been upset because they felt like the delivery driver was speeding down their road or whatnot. So, and who knows if they had words or whatever happened. But again, kind of training those drivers that if someone is saying, hey, you're blocking my driveway, or, you cut me off, or whatever's happened, to really kind of take that step back and have them, trained to just, kind of step away from that situation, not engage, and just kind of extricate themselves, out of that situation, right? To de-escalate it, so that they don't get into a situation where there may be, an assault, that, whatever may happen. But really, kind of driving that home, that it's okay to, we want you to step away. We certainly don't want you to, put yourself in harm's way to protect anything that, any company assets, whether that's a vehicle or packages. Certainly, we want to prevent, theft and all of those things, but we don't want our employees to put themselves in the way of, in harm's way to, protect a vehicle, right? Letting them know, hey, we'll take care of that. We want you to be safe as well. And then again, just on that incident reporting, having a clear system to, for, employees to report how they're going to report incidents, or any suspicious behavior, and, just that clear, open process, and they understand how to do that, so that you're aware of things that are happening, so that, as an organization, you can step in to, do a review, or put, additional protocol in place, and figure out where there may be gaps in your system. And since we're mentioning employee training, we just always like to throw this in as a best practice if you're not doing it already. But obviously, any training that you do, including the training we've discussed related to crime and theft prevention, should be done for any new employees, or any employees that may be stepping into a new position where they didn't get a specific training. Maybe they were working as a loadout person, and now they're moving to, into a DA position, right? So they may need some additional training, as a driver that's working in the field, versus that person just working, in the terminal. And then, having regular training for all the employees. It's always good just to keep things, at the forefront of their mind. It doesn't have to be a super, it doesn't have to be anything, hours long training, even if it's a 15-minute, daily stand-up meeting where you're just throwing a few tidbits out there, related to, things that are happening, crime and theft. Don't forget, make sure to lock your vehicles. We know it's the peak season, everybody's busy. Make sure you're not, parking in areas that are going to put you, or, yourself in danger, that sort of thing. So, just, kind of making sure that you're using those meetings, kind of using your safety meetings and any meetings to put some, safety training in there as well. Certainly after an incident, and especially if, you found some gaps in knowledge or gaps in training, you want to either, go in to reinforce that, and do some retraining, or it may be possible, maybe that you've, put some corrective action in place, and you've changed, some protocol or an SOP. And so everyone needs to be trained on that, as a follow-up to that incident. And I will never say this enough. So, you may hear me say this in multiple webinars, but, all training needs to be documented in some way. Very, very early in my career, not only as a, risk management person, but at with any job, I think it was drilled into me that if it's not documented, it did not happen. Meaning you're not going to be able to, you can't say, well, yeah, we trained everybody. So it can be something very easy, if it's a sign-in sheet, for a daily safety meeting, or something where you document, hey, everybody on the shift was trained in this, and they sign off on it. Up to, if you have a learning management system that's keeping up with that. So if it's a video-based sort of thing where it's, kind of kicking out a video to everybody that's on staff, and they're, having a certain time period to watch it and do that training, and maybe take a quiz, and then it's all documented electronically in the LMS. But either way, just ensure that you're documenting what training was done for each employee, and that you have that somewhere, because that's going to be important, in the event of, an incident, especially if there is any sort of related litigation for that, right? The other good thing, with ensuring that you have all the stuff in place in training, is when we talk about, your insurance coverage and underwriters, they are looking at all this, right? So, your commercial auto people are looking at saying, how are they preventing, the vehicles from getting stolen or damaged? And so what are they doing to mitigate that, right? Maybe they haven't had any losses, but if you're an underwriter, you're saying, is that because it just hasn't happened yet, or because they've put some, protocol in place? Same with, say a work comp carrier, especially when it comes into, driver assaults and driver injuries, same kind of deal. Is it something that just hasn't happened yet? Or where is the training and the protocol, and the standard operating procedures that they have in place, to mitigate, these incidents from happening? So, just throwing that out there for everybody. And you'll probably, if you attend multiple webinars, you'll hear me say that every time I discuss employee training. It's just ensuring that it is documented in some way. So talking about just a few other ways we can, some proactive risk management strategies to prevent crime and theft. Things that you're probably already doing, comprehensive background checks on your employees, and having some standards set for the different type of positions, and what, kind of where you want to draw that line if someone has a certain, something on their background check where you want to make them, ineligible. We would certainly, advise you as you're making those requirements to speak to, your employment law attorney to ensure you're not running into any discrimination issues. But certainly comprehensive background checks are a good way to get started. With, doing regular risk assessments and using that, using data that you have to do those. And that kind of flows into that next bullet with, reviewing your strategies and adjusting them as needed. Look at what you're doing based on, trending in the industry, and crime statistics in those areas, as well as, in incidents that you've had, and kind of look at that to conduct those risk assessments and determine, are there any gaps? Is something, should we add a control here or there? Is something we're doing not working? Is some of the training that we're, giving our employees, are they not, are they not getting it? Do they not understand? Why do we need some, retraining? So, important to look at, to kind of look and review and make sure what you're doing, is working as it needs to work. And then promoting that see something, say something culture within your employees, whether that's, at your terminal, or, with your drivers out in the field, really giving them, empowering them to, speak up, having a clear channel for them to report these things. That's the other important thing, is that, maybe an employee hears something or sees something or thinks something is, a little suspicious. But if it's very difficult for them to report it, they may not do that. And so it may take an incident or something after the fact, and they say, well, you know what, that did seem funny to me. And, then all of a sudden you're like, well, if you would have known, you could have prevented it, right? So really having a good open way for them to either communicate that to a supervisor or whoever that is, and ensure that there's a good channel for whatever they're reporting to get investigated. It's also, it's better for your employee morale, right? They understand that, if they don't think something's right, or they see something that may be putting, themselves in danger, or, the company at risk, that they know you're gonna, do something about, protecting them and the company when they do report it. So, really just promoting that, and driving it home to employees why that's important. Developing community partnerships is another great way just for you to not only, be involved and get your organization, your business out there in the community as, a positive, kind of a positive force to help with things. So, partnering with those local authorities, and community watch associations. That way you can kind of be on the radar if, and giving them reports as well as them feeding them back to you. Especially with some of these larger, communities, neighborhoods, residential communities, apartment complexes, multifamily, that sort of thing. If there are any, boards or watch associations, being able to periodically touch base with them to let them know what you're seeing. Also, and they can let you know as well. So if there have been issues in that area, you're able to better inform your drivers as to what's going on, so that they can, kind of be on the lookout and protect themselves. The better relationships you have with everyone, the better chances it is that you're going to be able to, maybe share some of your security footage, whether that may be something that got caught on a dash cam, but also most importantly, getting footage from, local residents and businesses that they may have that, you may be able to, that may be useful, right? And then, any local crime prevention initiatives you can get involved in and checking some of the crime reports and trending in some of the areas that you regularly have routes and deliver in. That way, that gives you a good insight, right? To are there more patrols? What are they, what is the local law enforcement seeing being reported? And you're going to be able to arm your drivers with that information and give them, a little bit more, intel as to what's going on in that area so that they have that at the forefront of their mind and they're able to react and be proactive about how they're, going into those areas and making deliveries. And so with that, we've come to the end of our presentation. Corey, did we have any questions in the chat or did anyone have any questions?
There were no questions in the chat.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you all for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. Again, this webinar has been recorded and you will be able to access it on Hub Drive Online under that Risk Toolkit tab. So if you needed to rewatch it or you had someone else in your organization that you wanted to be able to see the presentation, you can access it there. And with that, everyone can have a great day. Thank you so much. Corey, anything else to add?
No, I think that's everything. Again, thank you guys for joining this morning.
Thanks. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.